Alright, so the PMT lower control arms are wider than the stock stamped steel ones. You'll see here where I've marked the area that I have to remove. There was a note on the control arms to clearance this. I had to install them, line it up, figure out how wide that clearanced area needs to be, and I've already done the driver's side, so now I'm going to do the passenger side. Just doing it with a 4-inch disc grinder. Alright, now that that work's done, I'm going to test fit it, see what it looks like, and if it fits right, then I'll just go back and clean it up. So we'll see what happens here. There it is. So, lower control arm goes right in here. Line up the pivot bolt hole. Let's see, there's that. So, I need to go a little bit wider on both sides. You can see where it's still hitting the control arm. Mainly on the front, a little bit on the back. Well, a little more grinding. All right, another test fit. And they got plenty of clearance now. So I'll just clean that up with the die grinder. And I'll throw some paint on it so it doesn't rust, and so it matches the rest of my nice clean frame. Somebody may be wondering why I'm cleaning this up, because with my luck, if I don't clean this up when I'm going to work on this thing at some point in the future, I'm going to reach my hand up there and with one of these shards of steel that's hanging off the frame, slice my hand wide open. So I want to make sure that doesn't happen to me or somebody else working on the car. And we're good. So I'll hit that with a couple shots of Eastwood's Chassis Extreme Chassis Black, which is what I've painted the frame with here. That way it won't rust quickly anyway. And then control arm goes in. So hopefully this will be the last time I'm putting this lower control arm in the car. You'll also notice I'm using brand new hardware, all grade 8 bolts. Not that there was any signs of anything other than 50 years worth of rust and dirt on the older ones, but no sense skimping out. I got all brand new suspension, might as well spend a couple extra bucks and put in brand new hardware. All right, so here's the new spring for the coilover. Here's some new urethane isolator pads for the top of the springs. And here's the new coilover. And I just stuck my hand in what I was going to show you here is you can see on here that there's a row of gray stuff there, which I just got on my glove here. That's anti-seize. Since the ride height on this car is going to be adjustable, because this is what the spring sits on, by raising or lowering this, you can adjust the ride height of the car. But since it's all aluminum, what they want you to do, and it makes sense, the reason they're doing this, is because as aluminum gets dirty and gets stuck together, it'll tend to oxidize a little bit. So that gray stuff that you saw on there is a little bit of anti-seize. And anti-seize is just kind of like a grease that prevents the two metals from getting locked up together. So these normally, so you can see how that spins freely. Once it hits the anti-seize, it no longer spins freely. So I got a couple inches worth there. Let me throw a little bit more on up top here. So the stuff I'm using here is just Permatex anti-seize. A little bit more there, and then I can come back and I'll just use the height adjusters, the right height adjusters, to actually spread it around. So as I'm spinning it on, it's spreading that around in the threads. And now I'm just going to hold this thing and spin the shock itself. Get this thing set at the lowest setting here. That'll make it easier to put springs in. So here's this is a hydraulic shock. This is not a gas shock like on a lot of newer cars. What I'm going to do, these are the adjustments. So one of these is for compression. Let me take a quick look here. The left one is for compression dampening. The other one is for rebound dampening. And what that does is it allows you to adjust how stiff the shock is on compression, which is when you hit a bump and the shock compresses. And then rebound is as it expands back out. So before I put the spring on, I gotta throw those back in there. It's two washers and a bearing, which allows this thing to spin freely on here. There's my spring. There's the isolator pad that goes on the very top. And in order to be able to get to these, I have to have them facing the adjustments. I have to have them facing inside. So let me go over here, adjust the camera a little bit so you can see the lower control arm. The shock, the top of it, mounts to the frame right where the stock shock did. So that's just going to go up into the shock tower area of the frame. It's not like a shock tower on a Mustang. This is an actual full frame car. But I need to extend this out all the way, and I didn't have it done. There we go. So now, as I raise this up into here, I'll adjust the camera here in just 1 second. Oh, and I just noticed I still have to flip this rubber shock bushing over. It's got two different size shoulders. There's a small one and a large one. The hole in my frame is for the large hole, so helps if you put it on the right side. There we go. So that is going to go up into the frame and put the top rubber piece on and then just crank the nut down, hand tight for now. Everything's just going hand tight until I get this thing all assembled. So we grab the camera here. You can see this is the top here. That's the stud from the top of the shock. This is the same rubber thing I had on the other part. And then the nut holds it all together. Now, what I'm going to do is raise up my lower control arm here, line up my bolt holes, which you may notice there are two sets of bolt holes here. The inner ones are going to keep it the same spring rate ratio on the suspension travel as a stock control arm. By moving it to these outer ones, I'm actually stiffening the suspension up just a little bit. It takes out a little bit of the leverage that the shock has, or the control arm has on the shock, which makes your suspension a little stiffer. And since I plan on autocrossing this beast, I want my suspension a little bit stiffer. That's the whole point of a lot of these control arms too. You'll notice in the still photos, oh great, I dropped that nut in the control arm. In the still photos, sorry as I try to dig this nut out of the control arm where I just dropped it. Now I can't even find it. Got it. The stock control arms are just stamped steel. They're really flimsy in comparison. And not that they're flimsy necessarily, but compared to these, they're fully boxed in or tubular. These are significantly stronger, which in a car that you want to handle really well, you don't want your suspension flexing around. That does not produce good handling. So, once these are in here, these are just going, again, hand tight. These are nylock lock nuts, so I can't crank them all the way down. I can only get them to where the nylock starts to engage. But there it is. All right, so we've got, now I can see the camera a little bit. What we got here, we've got the lower control arm right here is installed. The coilover here is installed. Here's the top of the coilover there. Like I said, this is all still loose. The next thing I'm going to put on is going to be my upper control arm right here. And I just got to get this thing ready to go in. So again, everything on this is loose. The upper ball joint is loose. My lower ball joint is loose. I need to get my hardware, which I have right here. So I said I was putting all brand new hardware on here. Bolts are all brand new. These top nuts are not brand new because I can't buy this particular item new, but everything else is. So this goes under the top plate here. The control arm goes over the top, and then I can line that nut up with the bolt and get it started. There we go. Comes in it again, hand tighten these. That is held on with 2 bolts. There we go. It helps if you have the right angle so that it will actually start. Tighten this up a little bit more. So you can see here the rubber bumper for when the suspension bottoms out if the front end were to be lifted, like if you're jacking it up or, God forbid, not necessarily God forbid, but if you ever got airborne. Let's crank this up a little bit. There we go. So top bolts here. When the suspension and you're setting your alignment, there's a whole bunch of things. There's toe, which is your tires, how much they point in towards each other on the front. There's camber, which your tires are like this, so that would be positive camber. This would be negative camber. For good handling cars, you want 0 or negative camber. You don't want positive camber. Positive camber does not handle well on the streets. And then the other thing you have here is going to be your caster. So caster is the front suspension part here, is the amount that it leans backwards. More caster makes the car want to drive straight in a line. So that's what causes your steering wheel to straighten out when you let go and you're going straight. You know, you're coming out of a turn, you let go of the steering wheel, it wants to go straight. That's caster that causes that. Car's caster does affect the handling, so this car from the factory had it, as do most cars, have an adjustable caster, and it's based on these 2 bolts up top here. The next part that's going to go in here, so my upper is now on, my lower control arm is on. The next thing I need to do is put in my spindle. This is what your brake drum, or in this case brake rotor, and front wheel all mount on. So I guess it would help if I grab the nut from the correct side here. There we go. And again, just going hand tight, and I will come back later and adjust all this stuff. If I can get there we go. So again, everything's going to need to be tightened up, and then I'm going to have to put my steering components back in. Right now, my front suspension, other than these strut rods, which are these long bars here, these mount to the front of the frame, and then they come back and bolt on here to your control arms. And what that is it keeps your front suspension from going backwards and forwards on the car when you hit the brakes or hit the gas. So there it is, front suspension is in place.